Some people seem to think that Windows XP is bad for playing older 90s games, but usually the problems occur because they are using Service Pack 3 or they are running it on a modern computer in which the hardware isn't very compatible with the older games they are trying to play. Now, you might be able to see here I've tried to recreate the beefy computer setup from CS Office, and see I've got a Dell Dimension 8300 down here. I have got a capture card now, but I haven't set it up, and I just want to show that it's the real thing. So, I was saying how one of the biggest problems is people run Service Pack 3. Now, Service Pack 3 changed a lot of how the system works. That's why when you go on the compatibility mode list on modern Windows, there's always a separate option for Service Pack 2 and Service Pack 3 because of how different they are. The other issue is usually that the hardware is a bit too new and isn't compatible. Now, sometimes it can just be as simple as the type of graphics card being used, but also the processor can affect things. I mean, really, you want a Pentium processor. 1, 2, 3, or 4 is usually pretty good. I mean, you could even use a Pentium D as long as you disable the second core. Avoid any 64-bit processors. Now, XP is a 32-bit operating system, but if you're running it on a 64-bit processor, even though it's not using 32, the 64-bit sort of architecture, it can still cause compatibility issues. Now, let's go on my computer here. So you can see that this is Service Pack 2, and this Pentium 4 is running at 3 GHz. There's 3 GB of RAM installed. Now, I've also got MechWarrior 3 already inserted, and it's already installed, but I've got it on compatibility mode for 98. Now, some games, well, most games that were made for 98 aren't compatible with NT. Some of them are, but some of them, they don't run natively on NT. If they do, then you won't have to do anything and they'll run fine. And in fact, some of those games work best on XP, but any games that were made for 95 or 98, if you put them on XP, if you just do compatibility mode and then do like 98 or whatever it was made for, it will run fine. And I don't know if it's just down to the fact that the hardware is also compatible, because this is closer to the time that these games were made. It's all down to the way certain hardware works, certain drivers and all that. Like, it all comes together, and if just one thing isn't quite working, that can cause problems for the whole game. I know I'm not being too technical here, because I don't really want to be, and I'm not exactly sure of the specific terminology yet. I mean, even though I'm pretty good with computers, but I do know that if you have the hardware from the era, then you're more likely to get things running. And that's why people who run virtual machines can't always get programs to work, because they're still running on newer hardware which isn't necessarily compatible. Some of these games have assembly code which is designed to work on specific processors, such as the Pentium. Now, I'm going to go ahead and run this so you can see. Anyone who has tried to run this game will know how difficult it is to get it to run. Best intro ever, but I'm going to skip that. So, let's say campaign. Green tea, channel name. Let's just go ahead and show you the mission starter. See, all that's working. One of the issues I've had on getting that to run on newer systems is like the music carries on. Honestly, the best game ever. This was made in 1999. And it's still looking pretty good. Now, obviously, it would look better if I captured it directly, but still, I just want to show you that it all works. So, that's running fine. I mean, I don't know why people used to say there were issues with it on XP. It's probably because, well, I do know why. It's because they were running it on the wrong hardware, or they were using Service Pack 3. Now, Service Pack 3 didn't come out till 2008. Service Pack 2 came out in 2004. I mean, when Vista came out, that really broke things as well. But you use Service Pack 2 or lower, you will have no issues, as long as the hardware is fine. Don't use AMD processors, though, because a lot of games have issues with AMD processors. That could have been one of the reasons people had issues, because I know in the early 2000s, that's when like AMD was getting quite popular as an alternative, but you can have issues on those processors. Same goes with the graphics cards. A lot of late ATI cards, AMD, like when AMD took over, it became AMD. But I just avoid AMD or ATI cards, and I tend to just go for Nvidia, or I'll go for Voodoo. It depends on what kind of games I'm trying to play. But if you go for an early or mid 2000s Nvidia GeForce card, then that's gonna play your older 90s games and your 2000s games like GTA, San Andreas, GTA 3, that kind of stuff. And you can use fraps on here as well if you want to record stuff, although it might not record that well depending on the game you're playing. And this is actually connected to the internet, by the way. People forget that this is still perfectly usable. So I could go on to YouTube. I don't make this video too long, but I just want to remind people that this is still like perfectly usable, but it's a good middle ground, like between the old games and like the slightly newer games, like 90s, 2000s. Okay, it doesn't really load well, but you used to be able to load YouTube on here. Okay, I think it was just loading, but it's very slow. The point I'm trying to make is that if you get the hardware right and the system right, it's still fine. Windows XP is fine, as long as you're running, I can't stress this enough, as long as you're running Service Pack 2 or lower, Windows XP will run fine. And as long as it's on the right kind of hardware. I think that's all I really need to say. So, thanks for watching, and I hope this helps anybody in making a decision on which system they can get, because these early to mid 2000s PCs are quite cheap at the moment, and they're still just as capable, if not more capable, than the 90s PCs, which are they've really sort of gone up in price recently. And I've said I'm not going to collect any more 90s computers. I mean, I've got a few, but it's just getting way too expensive, and you don't know what you're going to have to do to them, so you want it cheap anyway. So if you do have to do something, at least it's not too bad. I mean, the components for these kind of PCs are cheaper as well at the moment. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.